Okay, so thank you very much. I would like to share a pretty amazing implementation of SAP that we have experienced here at Packsize. We were able to go live within only 11 weeks upon the beginning of the implementation. I would like to share with you our goals, our previous state, and the experience that we had as we worked through the implementation. Now, to start with, let me share with you a little bit about what Packsize is. We are a small company, a relatively small company that has a manufacturing site in Sweden where we build packaging equipment that we provide to customers so that they can make any corrugated box at the right point in time when they need it. So this means that we are a company that operates, maintains, and owns equipment all over the world, all over North America, all over Europe. So we have a complex supply chain where our machines are moved to our customers into our facilities that then use the machine to make their boxes, and then we supply the corrugated. So this is a business that has been rapidly growing by more than 40% every year over the past 9 consecutive years. And what I would like to share with you is how the SAP implementation went for us. If we can go to the next slide, then share with you a little bit about myself. My background is corrugated packaging. I am from Germany. We started a special corrugated there in 1969, which we then merged with the packaging equipment when we started the US side of the business, which then I have been leading. And it was 3 years ago when we won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award, and it was there where we were first introduced to SAP. So when we got the award, there was an SAP representative that actually handed us the trophy, and I was thinking, we will never run SAP. SAP probably didn't realize their audience, and here we are now 3 years later. We are successfully running SAP globally, and we have grown so significantly that we almost didn't have a choice but to move to a new ERP system. So let's go to the next slide, and what I would like to share with you is some of the challenges that we had been facing. So as I mentioned, we are a relatively small company. We were probably $10 million, $15 million in sales when we first got introduced to SAP through the Ernst & Young event that I just mentioned. But we have been rapidly growing since, and we had been struggling significantly having visibility and knowing what our global entities were doing. So we were running different systems in different parts of the world, ranging from QuickBooks to Accepta, and we were basically a spreadsheet company that was sending spreadsheets back and forth with financial information, with consolidated data, and that just was not scalable. It also wasn't very robust either. We had major weaknesses in our supply chains. We were challenged with double data entry, with a good number of errors that as a result of the manual data entry we were incurring. But when you're growing at 40% every year, sometimes one just puts a Band-Aid over this. And so what we decided at that point was that we want to create a platform, because we could at that point already see that we had the chance to become a very large company, because the corrugated industry is huge. And with a new solution like ours, we wanted to migrate to an ERP system that would enable us to not ever have to make a second change again in our ERP system. So that's basically one of the goals that we set out to do to solve all of these problems that we were having. So if we go over to the next slide, then I can share with you some of the reasons why we chose SAP, the all-in-one solution there. We felt that we wanted to significantly improve our processes, and so the SAP all-in-one product was the platform for us that would enable us to grow beyond $1 billion in sales without having to make any future changes and switches to our ERP system. Now, second of all, also, we knew that as a rapidly growing company, we were not perfect, and we had no delusions about us not having perfect processes either. We knew that we were just not efficient in many processes that we had in place. And so what the SAP implementation helped us do is that we were able to benchmark our existing processes with what SAP calls the best practices for the industry that we are in. And so we were then able to significantly streamline our processes and make them more solid, more robust as part of this the all-in-one product. As part of our decision-making process, we also were exposed to multiple really good demonstrations that Bramasol enabled for us. And then for a small company like Packsize to be in good hands of someone who understands the needs of companies of our scope was very important to us as well. So what we had done then is, after we decided to implement SAP, and we can now switch to the next slide, we started with, from a leadership perspective, we started with primarily 3 narratives that we set ourselves out as a goal. And they were, number 1, we come in within budget. Number 2 is that we implement within the time frame. And narrative number 3, that we absolutely wanted to implement as part of our SAP implementation, is we are good at leading complex projects. And to give you a little bit of background, when as a small company one investigates these big ERP systems, and there are all these horror stories from big companies and from many companies from the past, primarily, where these switches in ERP systems are just portrayed as being so complex and so time consuming, to where these narratives became our anchor, basically. We come in within budget, we do this within the time frame, and we are good at leading complex projects. And then the second broad category of leadership that we felt was essential for a successful SAP implementation then was to communicate and repeat constantly our narratives, to also communicate the vision, basically the light at the end of the tunnel, how efficient, how much more streamlined our operations will be, how much easier it will be for our data entry, for our order processing, for many aspects of our operations that we have, and then also to hold the implementation team accountable for sticking with the time frame and with the goals that we had set ourselves out to achieve. Then we also decided that because our narratives were so important that we didn't want to deviate from them at all, to assign just the best people. And so we were able to work out a really good team effort between Bramasol and our execution team, and that's of course one of the reasons why we were able to implement this within only 11 weeks, when the goal was 12 weeks for the implementation. Let's go to the next slide. So on a high level, we did achieve the following results. We came in within the time frame that we set ourselves out at the beginning, 11 weeks. And we felt we are so proud of having achieved this in just 11 weeks. Then number 2 is we now run a global platform for all of our business units that can take us beyond $1 billion and even further than that. We are applying industry best practices. We proved that our narratives held up. We succeeded in all of them. Then a lot of additional smaller details, ranging from financing all the way to visibility. Maybe one item that I would like to highlight here is that we are in the business of primarily selling corrugated that is then processed by our machines. And with our previous system, we could not even tell how much corrugated we were actually selling. Our QuickBooks system only was able to report on the dollar amount. And so we were basically flying blind for the single most important commodity that we were selling. And of course, SAP enables you to generate reports for all sorts of different data points. And for us, corrugated is probably one of the most important ones. On the next slide, we highlighted some of the challenges. I mean, it's not, and lessons learned. I mean, it's not that an SAP implementation or any ERP system would go completely without challenges. Some of the things that we have learned is in relation to the old data, for instance, and also keeping the project on track and always monitoring that is high on the priority list. I already mentioned that putting the best employees to the project made one of the biggest differences there. And so on the last slide, I would like to share with you some of the specific measurable benefits that we have created here at Packsize. Overall, we have greater control and management. The foundation now to work with other facilities globally as part of the SAP system. Then we have the leverage to streamline the communication with vendors. That's one of the big topics also. We always had to double enter the data that we place into the corrugator before the corrugator is made. And when we make a mistake there, that's always $15,000 at least. The damage that we are creating there by not ordering the right dimensions or by not ordering the right quantities, for instance. And this can all be streamlined now by creating the interfaces now between SAP and our vendors. We have to reduce the lead times, the waste, by being able to plan in advance. And then specifically, our intercompany transactions now have become 50% more efficient. We can now track inventory. That was always a guessing game before. We are 30% more efficient there. The report generation process is 20% more efficient. Travel expenses module, that helps us to be 15% more efficient there. And then the order entry and also the error reductions, 10% versus 30% there. So overall, we are looking at on-demand packaging as a new industry that we are creating. It will not be uncommon in the future for pretty much anyone to make their own corrugated boxes. And if you have ordered online, companies, let's say Amazon or any of the big online retailers, you will have noticed how much bigger the box is over what it needed to be. So statistically speaking, 40% air is being shipped. And so as we build this industry, we now have a rock-solid platform that we can grow our businesses and processes on to remain and to build out our leadership. The next slide would be questions and answers.
All right. Thank you, Henko. That was wonderful. And I'm going to turn control over now to Carrie. Carrie Peterson is a solution engineer here. And if you'll just give me 1 second. Carrie? There you are.
Yes. Good morning. And I believe I've taken control. Are you seeing my my slides?
We do.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. As Courtney said, my name is Carrie Peterson, solution engineer for Bramasol, and I'm going to be doing a little user experience. Some of you may have seen SAP in the past. Some of you may be seeing SAP for the first time. But I'm very excited to show you, how the look and feel of SAP today. As compared to maybe if you have seen it in the past, what it looked like in the past. I'm going to compare that to, on the left-hand side here, maybe some of you remember the Motorola brick phone. I actually worked for Motorola in the 1980s when the phone was popular and thought that was pretty cool. And but as you look on the right-hand side, with the iPhone, things have changed over the years. And a phone is not a phone anymore. You have your games, your WebEx, your social networks. And the intent really, with the iPhone is to bring all that technology and all that information to your fingertips. What do you need and when do you need it? And I'm going to show you in the next 10 or 15 minutes how SAP has evolved along those same lines of providing you the information that you need at the fingertips. And so I hope you'll be as excited as I am. Just to lay some foundation here, I'm going to go through a few slides to show you what you're going to see on the online demo. To start with, here is just a page layout. So I'm going to show you a NetWeaver business front that you can have individual users can have their own home page. And then you're going to see pages that are Work Center pages for a group of employees. And those pages, you can define what the layout's going to be. So we've got some gadgets and graphs on the top part of the screen here. And then the bottom part of the page, you're looking at, it's called a power list, which is, again, fairly new with SAP. And it's an Excel-based looking kind of spreadsheet, but what's so different about it is it's executable. So I can look at sales orders, I can release sales orders, I can pay invoices, I can release production orders. So it's just not a nice looking Excel spreadsheet look, it's actually executable. So you will define what your layout looks like, and then these are the gadgets that you're going to use to pull into your page layout, and these can be internal or external. So you're going to be able to bring in news, you're going to be able to bring in weather, you're going to be able to bring in emails. Again, just like the iPhone, what is the information that you and your users or your employees really need to have at their fingertips in order to make business decisions and to do their work tasks? So this is the home page. Look at the home page. And as you see, I was able to bring in the Packsize website here. And the home page is going to be individual to your employees and to you. And then again, on the top of the page here, what we have are these work centers that are role-based. So if you have your production workers, they can have a work center and everything that those production workers need. If I'm in sales, then this is everything that the sales group is going to need. So an individual home page, which is can be multiple languages, by the way, user-defined, and then these work centers. Now, this is a demo environment, and I'm a super user, so I have access to all of these work centers where you or your employees are going to have just the work center and just the home page that you'll need to do your work. Point out a few more things with the pages and the work center. So you can do lookups. So in this case, if I was just wanted to look up a specific sales order, I could put in the 575 sales order number. And then what happens when I enter that is then my work area is going to change based on that lookup. And so now I can go right into the details of the sales order. And you're going to see this in the demo in just a couple minutes. Another example is from that sales order, I'm able then to look at something called a document flow, which gives me the whole history, the full history of that sales order. So it came from a quote, the sales order, and then the transfer from the warehouse for the delivery, all within a couple clicks of that home page. And then the purchasing workbench. So not only are these gadgets that you're going to see up here, and again, I'm going to be going through this in the demo, but these gadgets are interactive. So as I select my requisitions, which showed 4, then my work area changed to show my 4 requisitions, just as when I put the sales order number in, so my work area changed that specific sales order. And then from that purchase order, I was able to go into that document flow and not only see the specific flow of what's happened with that purchase order, but now I can just select that invoice and the actual invoice comes up. So information at your fingertips to do your transactions. So let's take a look at what it looks like in the software. So as the PowerPoint presentation showed, I've gone into, I've created a home page with Packsize's website. I have a couple lookups, brought in some press information from SAP, some weather from Salt Lake, and something else that you can do in within these pages is I can just click on this icon on the right by the forecast, and I can collapse this particular tray, which then brought up what was below it, which was the Salt Lake news. Now on this favorites list, so I've talked about having these work centers, but your employees can also have their favorite transactions that they go into right here on their home page, where they might not need to even go into a work center. So this could be, when we have the example of the iPhone, this could be pulling in all the functionality right into a single home page that they can do their day-to-day tasks. Now those that need to go into specific work centers, in this case I'm going to select the sales. So as I go into the sales work center, I have my favorite list on the right. I have the gadgets or the graphical representation here in the center. And I mentioned that the work area down below is going to change based on what I select on the top part of my page. So if I select sales orders due for billing and I click on that, now my work area is going to pull up those 18 sales orders that are due for billing. And then, as I said, this is not just a Excel-based spreadsheet that I'm looking at. that it's actually an executable document, that if I select one of the records, now I can execute, collect billings, do individual billings based on what I've selected down below. So that's, again, one way of pulling up the sales order. I can also go into this. We have the Access Customer Cockpit. So SAP has lookup or search functionality that I can. So I'm in the sales department, and the customer gets on the call, or I answer a customer call, and they're asking, whether a specific order's been delivered. I know in the past I've spoken with a number of customers that have had to, take the customer information down, tell you I'll get back with you in a couple hours, and and call the customer back. Well, in this case, and maybe the customer doesn't know what the the order number is your service rep can just put in the information that they have, and in this case, if I could spell, that would be nice. Put in the information they have. They know that the customer, starts with New York, and this customer is in 2 different locations. So select the location with that specific customer, and then the orders for that customer are going to come right up into the work area. And then, based on additional information, so the customer says, well, I know that I put the order in on the 6th. So we're going to go ahead and select then this particular order. And now I can look at the history of that order. So I've made 2 different, I did a search, came up with the orders, all the history of that customer and those orders. And now I'm going to be able to look directly at the order that the customer was calling about. And then once I look at the order the customer's calling about, then I'm going to be able to do that document flow to actually look and see what's happening. Of course, having said that, my screen has decided to just stop working here, so we'll go back and we'll do a display. Try it one other way. And so I'm glad that you saw that in the PowerPoint, because that would bring up the history of the document and go right to the document flow. So let's go back to our work center. And I could have looked at the customer right here as well. Let's take a look at the purchasing workbench. So we talked about sales and customer calling in. Same thing with your suppliers. So you're on the phone with the supplier, and how can I get to that information regarding that supplier as quickly as I can and not have to call that supplier back. Same thing with this workbench. I have particular lookups, and in this case, I have my requisitions. So if I just wanted to see either the requisitions that I was responsible for, which now you're looking at, again, my work area, it's going to change here to the requisitions. It's refreshing. So there's my 4 requisitions. I also have just my purchase orders. So if I select this tab on the right, then I can look at the purchase orders that I'm responsible for. So you have these work centers that are for a group of people that either work in sales or work in production or work in purchasing. But then they can take that one step further, as I've just done, and I can say, okay, and within this work center, I just want to see my requisitions. Or on this power list, I've created a query that is just my purchase orders. So now I don't have to go out and search for the transactions or the work that I need to perform in the day. It's going to be pushed to me. And now if I take this my purchase order and I take a look at the purchase order that the supplier is calling about, it actually, by just selecting that order off of the power list, it brought up the purchase order. I have full visibility. This is the actual document. And then I can go into this document flow. And while I'm on the phone with the supplier, I can go through the full history, and I could say, yes, the invoice has gone out or the payment's gone out. And just by clicking on the invoice, then the actual invoice document just came up. So again, just a couple different clicks, and I've gone from a supplier calling in asking about a purchase order, an invoice, directly to the invoice document. And since the supply chain manufacturing is my area of expertise and close to my heart, I have to click on the production work center before I turn over control. And again, I've got my favorite list, so I can navigate directly through my favorite list over here on the right. I can do my lookups. I've got my, my graphics that represent just the information I need to look at. But when I further the point with these work areas, these power lists, if I selected a production order, just want to show you the list of all of the transactions, the functions that can happen with that particular purchase order, so I don't have to go anywhere else other than right here in my work center to perform those tasks. So just to recap that as phones have evolved over the years, so has software, and that not only does the iPhone have the information listed before, but you can also now SAP. You can access SAP and the information, the transactions I just showed you, as well as on the iPhone or the iPad. Okay, and now I'm going to be turning this over to Frank.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carrie.
I'm going to assign you presenter rights.
Okay, great.
Everybody, I'd like to introduce Frank Chang. He's a solution director here at Bramasol, and he'll be talking to you about implementation.
Thank you, Courtney. I am going to be sharing my PowerPoint. Let me know when you see it on your screen.
We see it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Carrie. That was excellent. A lot of the stuff that you demoed is really exciting stuff. And let me just give a quick background on myself. I'm the solution director here at Bramasol. I've been with Bramasol for roughly 4.5 years, and I actually worked with SAP late in the 1990s, and I worked for SAP doing implementations and consulting for about 7 years, doing different types of projects for different types of customers. So, large customers as well as small and medium customers. And the one thing that was always interesting was that the approach we took back then was always the same, depending, it didn't matter whether I was working at a Coca-Cola or General Motors or at a much smaller client. We always, took the approach of having a standard vanilla SAP system that was basically the same software code. And then when we get through a project process, and part of the project process is blueprinting, basically asking questions, what are the things you're doing today, what we call the as is, and what do you tend to do for the future? What do you need, what we call the to be? And based on the blueprinting process, then we would then gather up all the different business processes and requirements from different areas within the business and build a huge template or blueprint. And then after that, we would go to what we call the realization phase, basically implementing what we agreed upon with the client on top of the vanilla system. And so as you can imagine, that's a pretty long system because you're starting out with a blank template, a vanilla system that's the same with your Coca-Cola or your mom and pop shop. So everybody went through the same process. It was definitely inefficient and took a lot of time. So as a result, you heard about SAP implementations taking months and years and just on and on. Well, that's definitely the old model of implementing SAP. What you heard from Henko where they implemented in 11 weeks, that's almost unheard of back then. But today, it's pretty typical, pretty standard for SAP customers to be able to go live within weeks rather than months or years. And how is that possible? Why is that happening today? Well, it really hinges upon the concept of rather than taking a blank system, you now are presented basically as a new client with an off-the-shelf system that's suited for your industry. So, for example, within Henko's situation, we used the IM&C baseline industry template. And basically, the system that was delivered at the beginning of the project was a fully capable, ready-to-run system with all the business processes from the order to cash, procure to pay, financials, and other things as well. So basically, we're switching around the mentality of taking a blank piece of paper, gathering requirements, and then implementing that, and to taking an off-the-shelf system that has pre-configured business processes, then asking the question, does this particular set of processes work for you? If not, what are the gaps or the adjustments we need to make? So what we typically find is that about 80% of the off-the-shelf content actually typically works for our customers, and there's always a 20% adjustments, unique reports, special forms, those type of things that would have to be always adapted because the business does have unique business drivers and they have unique business requirements. However, by taking an off-the-shelf system that's loaded with content, you're really able to streamline the business processes. At the same time, a business that is growing really can leverage the best practices that's been proven, tested over time. So the implementation itself is much shorter in terms of time, resources, and dollars, as well as risk. Looking from a consulting perspective myself, I always look at risk, and the more you can minimize risk, the better off you are. So let's go to the next slide. A lot of people have talked about this business all-in-one. What exactly is a business all-in-one? So let's clarify that for a second. Basically, you're still taking the same code base that back in the 90s, the SAP ERP system that's been enhanced over the years through the different evolutions, but it's still the same solid core that runs business-critical applications from Coca-Cola's large enterprises to small enterprises of today. So you still have this proven solid core. But on top of that, you're basically adding or implementing SAP best practices, best-in-class industry expertise, different things like project revenue recognition, order to cash, all of that is already pre-packaged and pre-delivered on top of the system. And on top of that, Bramasol has a tremendous amount of in-house knowledge and expertise around things that our SME customers are facing every day. So we add our Bramasol flavor on top of that as well. So again, you get a pre-packaged system that uses a solid, time-tested and time-proven core of SAP financials and sales and manufacturing and so forth. But you add in the best practices, you add in the Bramasol know-how, you end up with a much faster ROI, you have much lower risk, and you, again, the greatly reduced timeline and cost that's associated with that. All in all, it makes for a great situation as an SAP customer today to really face, really a much shorter and much more rapid SAP implementation versus in the past, the rumors of, large SAP implementations and so forth. So where does this best practices and the industry expertise come from? SAP really pulled a lot of different sources to get this leading industry information. Again, it comes from industry surveys. SAP participates in many industry councils, industry conferences, and industry events to get information. Our customers are part of SAP user groups that regularly attend SAP meetings to tell SAP, the latest feedback on what the industry is facing, what the new functionality is needed, new reports, new legal requirements, anything like that, as well as leading industry clients, as well as the top leading industry analytics. Again, partners like Bramasol, all we do is we specialize in SME space, and we can tell SAP what the SME market needs from a solution perspective. And SAP also has its own group of industry experts, what we call industry principals. They're all actively involved all the time, really keeping on top of what's happening within each industry, what's being needed and evolved through the solution. So it's never a static solution. It's constantly evolving, constantly improving. Some of the examples of best practices content, and you'll hear that thrown out a lot by pretty much all the vendors. Everybody talks about best practices. Well, with SAP, it's much more than just words. We really embrace having a prepackaged solution with best practices. What does that mean? That means when you implement SAP and we talk about best practices, you're going to get a whole library of process flow documents. These process flow documents really detail out what the business processes that are configured out of the box. There are detailed presentations that can be used for project kickoff workshops. I remember in the late 90s, I would have to create my own templates, my own workshops based upon vanilla templates. But again, these are fully completed presentations that you do not have to do anything with. They're just ready to be used by project manager, by the team. So again, cuts down on the prep time needed to do a project. There are detailed step-by-step procedures, and these detailed step-by-step procedures can be used for training new people. Once you're live on SAP, you can use them to train a new end user that's using SAP. You can follow the step-by-step document. You can also use it during the project in the training phase, in the testing phase, because again, testing is a critical part of the project. So these are ready to use out of the, as is. On top of that, there are also technical configuration details. So again, with the SAP best practices concept, we do building blocks. So for example, for order to cash, there are building blocks for particular types of orders, particular types of billing, particular types of accounts receivable processes, dunning processes. And these building blocks basically are very detailed and very explicit in terms of what you need from a configuration perspective and what the dependencies are. So it really helps a project team as well as the technical people understand, what the base system has in place and how to enhance that going forward. On top of that, you get a fully complete set of master data. So you get a whole company code, you get sample customers, sample vendors, sample product masters, sample bill of materials, you name it, the SAP system has all of that sample. So when I mean it's ready to run, you can actually run a sample business using the sample master data out of the system as is. What we typically do in a project, we'll take the sample master data, find out if there's any gaps to the customer requirements, and then basically make copies of that for go live. And again, that cuts down on configuration time that's needed. This is an example of the best practice content. This is a best practice flow for returns authorization. So in this case, you can see that there's an event. Basically, a customer's called in or it has sent a complaint about a particular product that needs to be returned. And then it goes through a particular process within internally in terms of creating a return order, doing a return confirmation, and then with receiving the return item from the customer within the warehouse. This type of process flow basically makes it very easy to understand what the SAP process is out of the box and how to easily adapt that. For example, if you wanted to add an extra step with when the customer is returning a product, but you want them to file a survey, for example, before they return a product, you can easily adapt the SAP solution to add that additional step and say, let's have customer A, B, and C fill out a survey before they return the product to us. You can easily incorporate that into this business process. Again, you can take this as is and just tweak the 20% that needs to be adjusted. In talking about the industry portfolio, there's a lot and a comprehensive set of best practices, anything from aerospace and defense, automotive, and even sub-verticals within an industry. For example, the dealers within automotive or suppliers. There's banking, there's defense and security, there's high-tech, industry machine components that we used at Packsize, insurance, mill products, media. So you name it, SAP has the most comprehensive portfolio of industry solutions. And again, this is constantly evolving and growing. On top of that, SAP also delivers a best practices business intelligence reporting content. So, for example, here we have a set of dashboards that a CEO can reuse out of the box. It can have particular metrics around, discounts on loss from suppliers, manufacturing cycle times, days of inventory, and so on, as well as operational type reports, for example, for sales, service, purchasing, manufacturing, financials. And the content includes these graphics that you see here that Carrie showed earlier, the different types of charts, the drill downs, the lookups and so forth. That's all pre-delivered as well. And just as a aside to mention, I do want to mention that we do have another webinar where one of our customers recently talked about their executive management using dashboards and using SAP Business Intelligence. So if you're interested, please let Courtney know that you want to get access to that session. You'll be able to get much more detail around that. Again, in terms of best practices content, it's just not just by industry, but it's also by region as well. So we have customers that use the content within the United States, but they also happen to have operations in Mexico or Brazil. So you'll get the SAP best practices by region as well. Australia, Singapore, you name it. There is over 50 country versions of best practices available as well. So just to recap, what's changed when I was doing SAP implementations back in the 90s versus how we're able to do extremely rapid but successful implementations today. Rather than taking a standard vanilla system, doing the whole long project cycle, doing a long blueprinting, a long configuration cycle, we take the best prepackaged industry system, put it in front of the team and say, based upon what SAP pre-delivers, let's figure out what doesn't work and make those changes, but let's take the system as is and let's go live with that, So that really changes the whole mindset about, rather than creating every process from scratch, the question is, why not use this best practice that's been proven through the industry, through time, by many other SAP customers. So it really reduces the risk, reduces the time, and increases the ROI for a project. But having said that, Courtney, I'll turn it back to you for the question and answer section.
Great, thanks, Frank. Alan, at this point, we'd like to open up the lines for one line at a time for question and answer. If anybody has any questions, feel free. Alan will give you the instructions to open up your line.
Thank you, ma'am. If you would like to signal for a question or comment, please do so by pressing the star key followed by the digit 1 on your telephone keypad. If you're using a speakerphone today, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, to signal for a question or comment, please press *1 at this time. We'll pause for just a moment to allow everyone an opportunity to signal for questions. Our first question comes from Ralph Smith with Acme. Please proceed, sir.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering, do we need a full-time IT staff to support the SAP solution?
Henko, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, I can take it for Packsize, and then maybe Frank, you can then maybe answer for other businesses. No, we don't have full-time IP staff dedicated to SAP. We absolutely don't. No, we just don't have that. We don't need to have that. It's
That's great. I'll add my observations as well. Having worked, at large enterprises with teams of hundreds of SAP shops, I think there's a myth that you need a full IT team to support SAP. But at Bramasol, we do nothing but at SAP, and we focus on the SME space. I would say that about 80 to 90% of our customers do not have even a full-time IT person. A lot of them are really part-time or outsourced IT. So you definitely do not need a full-time IT staff to support SAP. With the Bramasol services offering, we basically supplement SAP resources as needed. And on a previous webinar, the CIO said it best. They do SAP in-house, really without much intervention from SAP, but they use Bramasol as a supplemental, to help out with bandwidth needed. Again, it can vary greatly from either having, 1 or 2 IT person or to part-time or really no IT person at all. But in terms of running SAP, because the system is so time-tested and proven, there's really very few issues that come up on a day-to-day, in terms of running the SAP system. Sure, we'll have clients that need to make adjustments to the system and things like that, where we'll be happy to get involved. But our goal as a SAP provider is to see our customers be self-sufficient as much as possible, and that really means low maintenance on the IT side as well as on the business side.
Great, thanks. I have another question that's somewhat related. How much training is required, especially if I choose to move forward without a dedicated IT person dedicated to SAP? Like, how much training is required for my business users, for example?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. As a former consultant myself, I've seen a mix. What I always encourage customers to never forget about training. The more knowledgeable your team is, the better off you are. Having said that, as part of the implementation methodology, we do have training embedded within each business process, within each stage of the project. So we will basically work hands-on with you to develop a custom training curriculum, and typically that means some overview of SAP in the beginning of the project, and then prior to the testing phase and go-live phase. And then after that, we find that most customers are able to pick up this SAP know-how pretty quickly because of the comprehensive documentation that's delivered out of the box.
Great, thanks. I do have one final question. If I were to change my business processes or even add a totally unrelated business line, how easy is it for SAP to work with that change?
Yeah, that's a common question I get a lot from our SME customers, because our SME customers are constantly evolving to take advantage of new markets and new business models. Really, in terms of going with SAP, one of the things I heard one of our customers say that the reason they went with SAP is because no matter how they evolved, they were always confident that they didn't have to re-implement or change to another ERP package. SAP could always grow with them. So having said that, I'll give an example. One of the customers I'm working right now, they do heavily projects around construction, but in the future they may have an in-house factory to build components for their construction business. So rather than doing construction, as a business, they may actually be doing heavy manufacturing and with all the associated process in terms of plant maintenance and MRP and all of that. So, in terms of a situation like that, there's nothing better than an SAP best practices. They can start out, for example, with an SAP project-based best practice, and then over time, as they get a factory, they get manufacturing, everything that's associated with that, they can add on the best practices from the manufacturing perspective, whether it's discrete manufacturing, whether it's other types of manufacturing, there's SAP best practices that can be added on over time. So it's not just a one-time shot. There are some other software packages out there that they have best practices and they implement it as part of the methodology, and that's it. And to make future changes is very difficult, very costly. With SAP, at any point in time, you can download the new best practices, additional add-ons, and turn them on in the system. So it's very streamlined, very efficient, and very easy to adapt the business with all of the available different templates and business processes available from the different industry content. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thanks a lot, Frank.
Yep.
And as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, to signal for a question or comment, please press star followed by the digit 1 at this time.
While we're waiting for more questions, Hanko, do you have anything to add to either one of those questions?
No, not really, except for the fact that the teamwork with Bramasol has just been outstanding, especially relating to the initial implementation and then also the training process. We have been able to Frank, exactly as you just described this, very quickly been able to pick up the use of the new ERP system, and then we have been able to train further users within our own organization by ourselves. So that's been, and also the fact, back to the IT question also, the fact that this runs in a browser window makes this very easy and user-friendly. And I mean, if we ever have IT problems, they are related to something completely different, but certainly not related to SAP.
Fantastic.
Right, and I do want to add that SAP also is investing heavily in the mobile space. So there are SAP apps available in the Apple App Store, as well as on the BlackBerry and Android platforms. So anyone who happens to have a mobile phone, and a lot of enterprises are going this way, a lot of our customers are looking into this and adopting this approach as well, really being able to have the mobile SAP applications that have the same real-time content and the graphics and everything on the iPad or on the tablets or on the smartphones, as Carrie showed. Very exciting in terms of the new frontier of being able to use SAP anywhere, whether it's a project manager on the field on a customer site, or a salesperson in front of a customer, or somebody in the back office. So again, very exciting in terms of being able to use SAP no matter where they are.
Great. At this point, do we have any more questions?
At this time, I'm showing no additional questions in queue.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining this call. And this recording will be available in the next few days. If anyone wants to follow up, you can find more information on our webpage, or you can contact us at info@bramasol.com. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
That does